What are the best strikers builds in Dauntless? What's the best build we can get on our strikers for every weapon element? These are the questions we're going to be tackling today. Hello everyone, my name is Trevor, I go by TheMrTrails, and welcome to the channel. I hope you guys had a good Christmas, and if you don't celebrate Christmas, I hope that you've at least had an above average week. And in either case, I want you guys to know that you are greatly appreciated. So you guys probably caught my latest video where I power leveled my strikers in less than 2 hours. But a lot of the builds I ended up using in the speed run were suboptimal due to the bounties I had drafted. For what ended up being a majority of the runs, I had aetheric equipped, as wounding bounties were actually rather fast to complete. But take the bounties out of the equation. What build or builds would I have been using had I had no wounding bounties? We'll be going over every element, including neutral, and because it will be coming up soon, we'll look at a build for now without the frost legendary weapons, and a build where we do have the frost legendaries. Meaning we'll basically be looking at 8 builds today, but there's going to be a couple of additional tweaks you can make to these builds as well. Consider leaving a like if you enjoy, and consider subscribing for more Dauntless content like this. The builds will be focused on if you're playing alone, as building for groups requires a lot of assumptions about what the other people are using. So let's begin with the builds where we can establish a baseline for what we want in our builds. The weapon elements that can get us the absolute best perk summaries available in the game are the Umbral weapons and the Blaze weapons. The perk summary we want to achieve ideally is 6 berserkers, 6 catalysts, 6 overpower, 6 predator, 6 rage, 3 discipline, and 3 wild frenzy. Unfortunately, unless there's some method of changing a weapon's built-in perk in the future, this perk summary is only possible on Blaze and Umbral weapons. And that's not very likely, as we'll likely see a change in the way cells and perks work before this happens. But for the Umbral and Blaze builds, we'll start off exactly the same. We're going to be using the Blitz, Frenzy, and Aether Drive tonics for our builds today, as that's what's going to allow us to do the highest DPS at this time. Aether Drive tonic pairs well with the Pangar Lantern and is generally the best to go with, but may change if you're fighting specific behemoths. We'll go with the Charog legs with Discipline inside, the Malkarian gloves with Berserker inside, the Koshai chest with Catalyst inside, and the Shroud helmet with Overpower inside. We are going to use the Titan's Crash with Cyclonic Strike Plate for our mod and special. The Adamant Bolt does more base damage than the Titan's Crash special, however this is accompanied by a longer animation. This longer animation makes it so that the Titan's Crash special does more damage per second, and if we're going for the best builds that will kill things as fast as possible, the damage per second output is going to be a major factor. And then the only thing that's going to make these two builds different is the cells in the weapon and the weapon itself. For Umbral, we use the Thrax Strikers, bond them with Riftstalker, and put Overpower and Berserker inside. And for Blaze, we use the Torgadoro Strikers, bond them with Hellion, and put Wild Frenzy and Overpower inside. And these are the two best builds for general purposes in the game if your goal is to kill a behemoth as fast as possible. They have the best perk summaries available in the game, and they have pretty good unique effects as well. But there's obviously things you're going to want to change about these builds based on the situation. Other situations might again call for a different lantern, or if you don't want to use tonics, you slot conduit instead of catalyst, or if you're looking at trials, you need to tailor your builds for those fights specifically. In my video about speed reforging, entering the escalation 10 to 50 at level 11, I knew that going in with 6 berserker wasn't a great idea if I wanted to finish the escalation, as 400 HP would make me one shot to a lot more attacks than 550 HP would. So I swapped one berserker to another discipline and the other berserker to another wild frenzy. But let's move on to the other elements whose perk summary will only suffer slightly due to the built-in perk onto the weapon. The Drask weapon has aetheric attunement, and we sacrificed the 3 wild frenzy we had to accommodate for this. If you are not using catalyst, then you'll want to go with 3 berserker and 3 wild frenzy. But since we're going for the best build here, we're going to be using catalyst, and that means we are going to go with 6 berserker, especially when you have the Slayer's Path upgrades like the extra attack speed from Striker Reforges and the extra tonic effectiveness for the Blitz tonic. Before those upgrades even existed, the top trial runs were using 6 berserker and leaving wild frenzy for very niche cases. But if we still go with this 6 berserker, we're going to have the base build almost intact. As far as the armor is concerned, we're going to still have the Shroud helmet, Koshai chest, Malkarian gloves, Charog feet, and Pangar lantern, with discipline, catalyst, berserker, overpower, and catalyst slotted in those respective items. The Malkarian strikers are going to be bonded to Drask with berserker and overpower inside. This means our build for our Malkarian weapon is going to be 6 berserker, 6 catalyst, 6 rage, 6 overpower, 6 predator, 3 discipline, and 3 aetheric attunement. This similar perk summary is going to venture over to the Terra weapons. We're going to be using the Agorist strikers with the Karabakh Bond, still slotting in Overpower and Berserker, meaning instead of the Wild Frenzy of the Riftstalker and Hellion builds, we have Bladestorm instead. Some of you might be saying, well, why not the Skarn weapons with a Tenacious setup? Wouldn't that be better than the Karabakh weapons? I did a sanity test, if you will, on dummies in the training grounds. What is the dummy DPS looking like after 70,000 HP, which is a reasonably sized HP pool for a behemoth just below the amount that some Dauntless Trial behemoths have? I gave both weapons only Tenacious. I gave both weapons only Tenacious and Cunning. I gave both weapons only Tenacious, Cunning, and Discipline, and I gave both weapons only Tenacious, Cunning, Discipline, Rage, and Predator. No matter how hard I tried to jerk the DPS meter in the Skarn Striker's favor, it went to Karabakh every single time. And I did this for multiple times to try and rule out the crit RNG. Even with the last build where the weapons start off with 25% crit chance each, Karabakh weapons still won every time. The only way I was able to get the DPS to go higher for the Skarn weapons was to start the test with 100% crit chance. But if you gave that same advantage to the Karabakh weapon, it would definitely win. This isn't to say that the Tenacious Skarn builds are necessarily bad, but they're just not worthy of being the best title. I personally use Skarn Tenacious as my go-to Terra builds because I'm just lazy and don't want to dodge. Moving on to the Frost weapon builds, when we get the Frost legendary weapons, this build will be able to look exactly like the Shock and Terra builds. We sacrifice the Wild Frenzy for the weapon's built-in perk. In this case, it'd be the Frost legendary weapon bonded with Pangar to be Knockout King. But until that time, Pangar weapons are kind of stuck with a somewhat yikes perk summary. We can get 6 Catalyst, 6 Overpower, and 6 Predator, but the rest are going to be stuck with a +3. When considering the use of tonics to be the best the build can possibly be, here's what I've come up with. We've got the Pangar Strikers with Berserker and a defense cell inside. What the defense cell is doesn't matter all that much beyond your personal preference. Shroud Helmet with Discipline, Koshai Chest with Catalyst, Torgadoro Gloves with Overpower, Koshai Feet with Catalyst, and Pangar Lantern with Conduit, for a summary of 6 Catalyst, 6 Overpower, 6 Predator, 3 Berserker, 3 Conduit, 3 Discipline, 3 Knockout King, 3 Rage, and 3 of a defense cell. This defense cell disappearing will make all of my dreams come true when Frost Escalation releases, but for the time being, this is the best build I've got to rock. There's an alternative where you could go with 6 Rage and 3 Wild Frenzy instead of 6 Overpower, 3 Conduit by doing Charog Feet and Malkarian Gloves instead, and it would be situational as to which would be better. But in general, the 6 Overpower build would tend to go to the extra mile. Moving on to Radiant, we'll be using the RYYZN Strikers, which we actually don't need the legendary for the Strikers to take full advantage of the perk summary. But we do unfortunately have to switch out our Berserker to Cunning, since leaving Cunning at 3 is a horrible life decision. So our perk summary is 6 Catalyst, 6 Cunning, 6 Overpower, 6 Predator, 6 Rage, 3 Discipline, and 3 Wild Frenzy. And to achieve it, we use the same base pieces and cells. Shroud Helmet, Koshai Chest, Malkarian Gloves, and Charog Feet slotted with Discipline, Catalyst, Wild Frenzy, and Overpower. Using the RYYZN Strikers, we're able to slot Cunning and Overpower in there, and still using the Pangar Lantern with Catalyst. And here's where it gets tough if you want to use a neutral weapon. The best of the neutral strikers are the Nasher Strikers, which come with a pre-built Rage Hunter on them. I think the best course of action from here, particularly now when you're trying to fight things above your own power, is to max out Catalyst, Overpower, Predator, and Rage Hunter at 6, then have Berserker at 3, 3 Conduit, 3 Discipline, and 3 Rage. You can do the same thing with 6 Rage, 3 Rage Hunter, and 3 Aetheric Attunement instead, which would likely be better for the later levels when you're fighting something below your level, but it isn't really recommended to use neutral weapons in the first place. But for the 6 Rage Hunter version, we'll be starting off with Hellion Helmet with Predator inside, Koshai Chest with Catalyst, Torgadoro Gloves with Overpower, Charog Feet with Discipline, Pangar Lantern with Catalyst, and the Nasher Strikers with Berserker and Conduit inside. And that will bring us to the end of the video. I want to state again that these builds are optimized, but aren't going to be the definitively best builds for every given situation. For instance, in the Drast Trials, Overpower is a rather useless cell, but in the rest of the game, Overpower can be used as your main damage source. And again, you can swap some of the Berserkers to Wild Frenzies as a justifiable decision, especially when you're playing with Conduit instead of Catalyst. And again, I myself tend to use the Skarn weapons instead of Karabakh, particularly in the situations where I need to survive, like doing a trial carry, which you guys can pretty often see me doing trial carries over on Twitch. It's the same username as here, and the only rule is we don't call it a stream, we call it a hangout. But guys, if your goal is to kill things quickly with strikers, these are the best builds to do so for each element. If you guys enjoyed, consider leaving a like on the video. And if you enjoy Dauntless content and are not subscribed already, consider subscribing to the channel. channel, where I post Dauntless content every week. I've been Trevor, I go by TheMrTrails, and I will catch you guys next time.